Welcome, everybody. My name is Ray Bittigan. I'm the president of the Photography Council, and I have a lot of people, it looks like, on the list who may not live in Portland, and I think they're probably friends of Karen's. So I just want to give you a little information about what the Photo Council is. The Photo Council is a membership group that's part of the Portland Art Museum, and we do fundraising for the photography department so that we can buy prints and acquire things for the museum. And that consists of these monthly talks. They're the third Wednesday of every month. Normally they've been at the museum, but for the last little bit, we've been doing them online. Some of the other things we do are private tours with the curator and an occasional fundraising trip. So we have a good time. We raise money for the museum and we feel good about that. Even if you live out of town, you could join up with us if you are so inclined. And you'll know your money goes towards the acquisition of prints for our permanent collection. I've been hosting this brown bag thing for a handful of years, but I'm just now getting used to doing it online, so bear with me a little if I seem awkward. It's hard to talk into space. I'd like to welcome today Karen Hymer. Karen is living currently in New Mexico, spent her career, it sounds like, in Tucson, Arizona, which is my hometown. So we've got some people in common that we know. I'm looking forward to seeing her work. I know of her gravure work, which we're going to see at the end. But I think today we're going to get to see kind of a timeline of things that she's been up to. So let's welcome Karen Hymer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here. And so, Ray, maybe I should have titled my talk Womb to Tomb. That's what Ray said this kind of talk is considered sometimes. So he's right. I am going to start kind of from way back when I was a child, but I'll try not to bore you too much. But you know, I guess let me try to get the first slide up. We'll see if I can get this to work. Let's see. All right, here we go. I have to share the screen. Oh gosh, please bear with me. This sort of thing is not fun. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so Ray, you'll let me know if there's some technical problems, I trust, along the way. So
looks good so far.
Okay, good. So I titled the talk Art and Belonging because a constant theme in my life is really trying to figure out, you know, where is it that I belong and what is my artwork about, or why am I doing it, or, you know, where do I fit? And now during the pandemic, of course, I think it's even more crucial that we further connections with each other and think about how we relate to each other. So, so I'm going to, you know, continue in that way. All right, so let's see. There we go. So I'm going to show a lot of images today, so I will be going pretty fast. But basically, I was born in Tucson, but I really grew up in Phoenix. And I had a pretty kind of average middle class, very happy childhood. I didn't grow up in a family with art or music or theater per se, but we lived in a neighborhood, lots of kids. We did a lot of imaginative play outside, coloring book contests and plays, and, you know, we had a great time. So, you know, I started really down the path of being a photographic artist. When I was around 12, I found my grandfather's camera in the garage and took it to the camera store, and the men there were kind enough to show me how to use it and sold me black and white film. And so I started taking classes at the Parks and Rec to learn to develop and print photographs. And my early work was, you know, images of my family, my pets, my friends, and making photographs at that time for me was a way of finding connections and belonging and creating memories or preserving memories, those typical types of things. I went through high school and worked on the yearbook and did a lot of different art in the art department. We didn't really have a photo area, but I did it through yearbook. And so then I continued on and went to college to study art. In college, I was an 8-year undergraduate because I couldn't quite find the school that fit for me. So I started at a school in Southern California called Johnston College. It was an experimental college on the campus of the University of Redlands. It was a wonderful place. I met many of my closest friends today, and also my ex-husband I met during that year, but I only stayed a year because they cut my financial aid, and it was a private school and I couldn't go back. So I wandered around a little bit and ended up at ASU in Tempe, and they had a great photo program there. it was, you know, a lot of good work coming out of that school, and still does. But at the time, this was the late 70s, it was really when the new topographics work was popular, and that was more the approach to the urban landscape and an objective approach. And I was doing rather intimate, revealing self-portraits. So I didn't quite fit. And there also were no female faculty at the time, and that just didn't really work for me. So I ended up in Boston at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, and that was really a great fit for me. It was more of a painting school, and there was more interaction between the different media. As much as I love photography, and this is an example of an early gelatin silver print, straight photography, I also really liked pushing the envelope and working in different processes. So at the museum school, I had the pleasure of working with some great young faculty, Bonnie Donahue, Sandra Stark, Bill Burke, Jim Dow, and it was a good place for me. But I also kind of felt like a fish out of water, because I was very much a Westerner, and now I was living on the East Coast, and it took me a while. So what I would do is I spent the winters at school, and then in the summers I would return to Arizona and photograph. So I did a series of work during that time. This is a cyanotype, and obviously way before Photoshop, so these are multiple negatives. This is an early quick print that I did, and quick print is not really a process you hear about anymore, but it was I think it was a graphic arts proofing process. A little bit of similarities to gum printing, where you make color separation negatives the size of your final image, and you coat the paper with ink, and it's a layering process. So this particular print has about 10 layers of color on it. You just keep coating it. So thinking about women and the role of women. So again, I'm trying to find my way in life as a young person, and examining my heritage as growing up in Arizona. So this is another gelatin silver print. This is a self-portrait with my father's boots and my boots. And this was made in Boston. But in the summer times, when I went back to Arizona, I started photographing rodeos, again, as a way to sort of examine my heritage. I definitely have issues with rodeos and centering around animal cruelty, but I was interested in the culture around the rodeo. And so a lot of my images were outside of the arena, what was going on. So these again are gelatin silver prints, printed like 11 by 14 for the most part. And these were rodeos in Flagstaff and Prescott, northern part of the state. I also did a series of dog shows. You know, when I was in Boston, you know, of course, the light in the winter in Boston is radically different than the southwestern light. And it's gray and has like a tonal range of like 3 stops. I mean, it was, anyway, so I started photographing indoors, did a series of dog shows, went to Madison Square Garden, New York, and photographed that. And so these are a few images during that time. So I did my share of kind of social documentary work, but I always was also doing some self-images and personal examinations. This is some portraits that I did. This is a cowboy named Buster who rode the fences on the Babbitt Ranch up near Flagstaff. So I did a photo essay on him, and I would go out very early in the morning and ride the fences with him. And at the time I worked at the Cowboy Lodge up there, and yeah, it was kind of a cross-cultural experience for me. So this is all, of course, negative work. This is pre-digital. So a couple other portraits I'll show you. This is a fisherman on Martha's Vineyard, a friend who lived in the Midwest and kind of had porch culture going on. Okay. And so during that time, I graduated from the museum school and knew that I wanted to go back west. And the previous summer before I graduated, I re-met a man I knew in college, and we fell in love. He became my husband ultimately. So I moved to New Mexico to live with him. And the great thing was that New Mexico had, at the time, really what was considered the best photography graduate program. So I was accepted at UNM and went there. And it was a fabulous place for me at the time. I was able to study with Tom Barrow, Betty Hahn, Patrick Nagatani, and a painter named Nick Abdallah. Those were the faculty that I really worked with. So during this time, I started doing large black and white prints and painting on the surface of them. So these are 4 by 8 feet, more or less, very large. And to display them, I gessoed the back of the prints and then mounted them on foam core so they floated on the wall. So you can see in some of them that the edges are imperfect, because I really was trying to get some more physicality in the work. I love the hands-on aspect of making imagery. And this series, I was thinking about kind of larger things like birth and death and you know, those types of things. And I was learning how to paint because I didn't know how to paint. I'm not sure I do know how to paint still, but anyway. So those works became my MA show, my thesis show. And then I continued on into the MFA program because that school had a split program. You could do the 2 degrees. And with the MFA program, you had to also write a written dissertation. But so this work came next, and this came out of my personal life where my husband and I were struggling to conceive and have a child, and we weren't having any luck. So we started down the road of the whole medical infertility stuff. So these images, black and white darkroom prints, and these are very tiny. So these are maybe 3 by 4 on up to 5 by 7. And they're blended images, as you can see. So the figurative parts in them are images I took. And then the other parts of the images are illustrations I got out of medical books. Because I started exploring the topic of infertility and hung out in the medical library and found out pretty early on I didn't really want to read the books, but I really love the illustrations. And some of these are 19th century illustrations of embryos, and they were so beautiful. So I would combine them in the darkroom, and then also do a technique called sabatier or solarization, where you expose the black and white paper, put it in the developer, pull it out early, re-expose the paper to light, and the existing silver in it starts to turn dark. And I thought that was appropriate for this series because it gave kind of an X-ray feel. And so these were really hard images, or it was a hard time, I should say. So that's another reason I made them very small and very intimate. So the viewer had to really walk up close to them. And they were matted in white, sterile mats, again, kind of reinforcing the medical aspect. So as we proceeded down the road of the infertility, we became clear that we weren't going to conceive. So this is the Infertility Series now. And at this time, I had pretty much mostly finished my coursework, and my husband and I had moved to Tucson, and I was finishing my dissertation up there, and I started teaching at Pima College, which was wonderful. I taught there for many years, black and white work. So this work became a little bit more aggressive and incorporating text, sometimes on the print and sometimes on the wall. Some of the images were taken with a plastic camera, so you can see the irregularities and the light leaks and all of that. And some of the text is from dreams or from my journal. I know it won't really be very readable on the screen right now, but the image referenced the fact that I actually did conceive and then had a miscarriage. So it was not a happy time. And this piece was titled "I Hate the Holidays," and the Christmas tree is made up of all Christmas cards with all the new babies and growing kids that we would receive. And this is a post-surgery image. And this one was titled "Multiple Sex Partners, Miscellaneous Scar Tissue." I never really had a diagnosis for why I couldn't conceive, but I did have a lot of scar tissue. So that's where this piece came from. And the final piece in this particular series. And these were printed 20 by 24 darkroom images. And then we had the wonderful fortune of adopting our son, Andre. So happier times happened, and that was in 1995. So that was a wonderful thing. And so again, at this time I'm in Tucson, I'm teaching at the college, and I really, really love teaching. It's a wonderful thing for me. So in the summers, my husband and I would go down to San Miguel de Allende and spend the summers down there to escape the Tucson heat and to mess around. So I started doing a couple series down there of Polaroid transfers. And this is the little machine that I use. So with Polaroid transfers, I was shooting with color transparency, 35 millimeter, and you get the film processed and you have a slide. Some of you young people won't even know what that is probably, but the slide would be placed in the little slot in the front of the machine. The Polaroid film is up on top. There's a light source within the machine. It would project the slide up to the Polaroid, and then you pull it out like you would instant film. But instead of letting the positive develop all the way, you pull it early, and then you lay the dye side onto paper and physically rub it. So that's the transfer process. So I did a series of images of my son, and it was a good strategy for me to make images because you could leave it set up. You didn't need a dark room. You could walk away from it when the baby woke up. So you could do little spurts of time. So these were the images, and I really loved the quality of color that came from it, and the messy edges, which, you know, reference the fact that it is a Polaroid. And so these are some of the images of him. And at the same time, I would walk the streets in San Miguel and photograph also. And so I did some transfers and also Polaroid lifts of the streets of San Miguel and a few of the other towns in the area. And to me, I really wasn't interested in documenting the place. This was really more like my impression of it and the feel of it. And, you know, I gravitate towards processes that are handmade and alter the image a bit. So I really, you know, I'm fascinated and kind of in love with the veracity of the photograph, but I also want to mess around with it. I want to make it somehow my own, I guess. Okay, and also I worked with a plastic camera, the Diana, and some of you are familiar with this, but in case you're not, I'm going to show you a few slides. So this is a camera that was, I think it came out in the 60s. It was a plastic camera, and artists, of course, co-opted it, and it has a very primitive plastic lens. It has no color correction on it, and very limited aperture settings, which you can see there. Well, those are the focus, but there's, I think, cloudy and sunny and partly cloudy. And the wonderful thing about it is the quality of the image, what it does to it. It distorts the color, it vignettes the edges, you get light leaks. It's very loose. This is an inside of one of my Dianas that I had to do surgery on, so I always kept a backup so I could, you know, combine them. And to the right is the Holga, which is a modern version of the Diana. I never really used the Holga much because it was really too good for the kind of images I wanted. It had too much sharpness and clarity. So these are some of the Diana images then. And again, you notice the edge of the frame. This was shot with 2¼ film, but the imperfection of the square. I really like that the edges are not perfect. So these were printed, I think 20 by 20 is about how I printed these. And this was the first time that I started printing digitally. So shooting in film, scanning, and then printing digitally. And as my son was growing, I mean, I really very much focused on being a mother, and he was the most important thing in my life. And I did some work, but in his younger years, I didn't do a lot of work. I really, it took so long for us to expand our family to include a child that I really wasn't going to miss anything of it. So by 2000, I was in a little bit of a rut photographically. I didn't have a focus, and I heard about a workshop being taught in Cuba through the main photographic workshops. So I registered for that and studied with Alex Webb and spent a couple weeks down in Cuba. So again, I was photographing film here, color film, and then printing digitally. And it was an amazing place to go if you're in a rut and try to, you know, I was challenging myself to actually get out on the street though and photograph that way. And it was, yeah, it was a really wonderful experience. But through the workshop, the way it was set up, you're supposed to be able to go out and photograph during the day, drop off your film, they'd process it, you get a proof sheet the next day. And they assured us they could do 2 1/4 film. Well, then we got down there and they couldn't. So I actually did all my work blind. I couldn't see what I was getting as I was photographing. And luckily my exposures were good because, you know, that's what's so great about digital. You could see what you're getting right away. But didn't have that advantage. And so this kind of jump ahead here then. I mostly focused on my son during the time period between the Cuba work and this series. And I did some work, but it wasn't, you know, true good series, I'd say. But in 2010, a big change happened in my life, and that was that my marriage of 25 years ended. So with any big change, of course, you start to really examine things. And my son and I moved into the town of Tucson, or the city of Tucson. We had been living out in the desert, and he was in high school at this point. I started working full-time at the college, and so I turned the camera on myself. It was very different being a woman in her 50s and being single, and really thinking about how women are represented in our society. So these are images that I took with an iPhone, and of my body, very much close-ups. I couldn't see what I was getting. I just was moving the camera around the body. And then these were printed digitally, and they were printed, I think let's see, how big were these? Oh, they were 32 by 32. That's right, I printed these quite large. And I was drawn to them, intrigued by the way it showed the aging process and elements of skin. And I felt like some of the images looked like they were more internal images rather than external. And I started to then show them in quads, in groups of 4. So this was 64 by 64, 4 pieces put together. For displaying them, I mounted the images on foam core, and then, well, actually I think it was gator board, but whatever. And then they were floated on the wall. And in 2014, I was invited to participate in an exhibit in Athens, Georgia, called the Third Act, and it was all about aging. And so this is one of my images on the wall. You'll notice I say that a lot of times I work in 2 different ways, examining the same topic or subject. And so I also was learning a new process to me called Photopolymer Gravure. So a couple of the gravures were also in that exhibition. And it was a great show to see people in all media examining the notion of aging in our society. And I also began photographing portraits of women over 50. So another direction, but of the same content. And really trying to seek an acceptance of beauty and the aging process. So these are not Photoshopped, they're not, you know, adjusted. These are the women as they are. And this is my sister and friends. And I was really striving to find beauty in the aging body and aging women. And it was a great experience working with these people. And so these were digital prints. Oh, this is my ode to Ann Noggle, who is another person I had the opportunity to work with when I was a graduate student. She photographed a lot of herself and other aging women, and she did a image like this of her and her sister. So this is me and my sister doing the facelift thing. So, so those prints, those were all printed as digital prints. And you know, as much as I like them, I miss the tactile quality, the hands-on. So I learned this process. I saw student work coming out of our college, and you know, took the etching class or the printmaking class at the college and learned this. And so these are photopolymer gravures. These are a couple of my very early ones. And there's many different ways to do the process. And I use a double exposure process, which I'm not going to explain too much, but here you see the plate on the left. So I buy plates commercially. It's a polymer plate that has a light sensitive surface on it. And then I make a positive of my image on a clear film, which is on the right here. You lay the film onto the plate, expose it to UV light. And there's one other step that includes an aquatint screen. But essentially you get an etching plate. And so there is the plate there, and this is my inking station, and you mix up the variety of inks. You can do any colors you want, and you coat the plate, and then you buff it off and lay paper on it, run it through a printing press. And so the ink is transferred to the paper. So these are all etchings. And I love the tactile quality of it, the way that skin is represented on the paper, and the velvety shadows you can get. So this series progressed, and I did some close-ups kind of referencing the previous skin work. These were all printed 8x10 and became the series that I call Age and Seduction. And I'll go through these pretty fast. And I did photograph some male bodies also. So these are, a few of these are male bodies. The gravure process was one of the early 19th century processes with copper plate. And this is a kind of a modern version of it. I also started including plant matter. I've always collected plants and bones and rocks, growing up in the desert. And so I started seeing relationships between the decaying plant and the body. And some of these images are hand colored. So on the surface, I've added watercolor to them just to add another element. And, I've been really pleased with the response to this work, particularly from individuals. So if we go back to the notion of connecting and, I like my art to be able to speak to people, and so many people respond to this work about the aging body, particularly women, but also men. And it's been very rewarding to me to have people respond positively to the work. It's kind of hard to tell the tactile quality on the screen, of course, but you have to see the prints in person. It's much better. And then this is part of a sub-series called Food and Flesh. And I was influenced by a cookbook by the Chilean writer Isabel Allende. And let's see if I can get the title right, Aphrodite, a Memoir of the Senses. So she talks about aphrodisiacs, and she states that food, like eroticism, starts with the eyes. So I started photographing with vegetables and fruits that are supposed to be aphrodisiacs, but of course I'm drawn to the ones that are decaying, because that's just what I find beautiful. And so that relates to the decaying body again. And in 2018, I was really pleased to have a book published of the work by Dark Spring Press out of Tucson. So this is a limited edition book, and I do still have some of them available. It's almost out. And this is just a display, so to show you how I display the work. I usually float them in frames on the wall. And a couple more gravures here. These are just examples of double plates, so messing around with printing two plates on top of each other. I haven't perfected it yet, for sure. Registration could be an issue. And this I show just to show you the same two plates printed with multiple colors of how you can, do whatever you want. So if anybody's really interested in the process, I highly recommend this book by Clay Harmon. It has a lot of great technical information of all the many different approaches. And then it has features of artists who do the process and their work. And then this is a link that I'd made an educational video. During this time, I started teaching the process out of my studio, and I also teach at Art Intersection in Gilbert, and I've had the great fortune to teach at Sitka Center for Art and Ecology in the coast of Oregon. And so I made this video, and there's links on YouTube and Vimeo to it. So other works that I continue to do have to do with botanicals and other processes. So these are some lumen prints. Lumen prints you do with black and white darkroom paper and lay plant matter on it and then expose it out into the sun. And it's really kind of amazing that the paper turns colors. So these are some of my lumen prints. The thing about the process is it's not stable in the sense that it's black and white darkroom paper, so you have to put it through the chemicals and the fixer. And when you do that, it mutes the colors. So I usually keep my originals in a black bag, and then I just scan them and then make inkjet prints from them. So these are our inkjet pigment prints. But the colors I just find so fascinating. The colors doesn't relate to the plant at all. And it depends on the kind of paper you use, how old it is, if it's warm tone or cold tone, there's all these variables. There's a lot of people playing around with lumen prints, and it's a very, very freeing process. And I enjoy doing some processes that are very loose and experimental, because the gravure process is so precise that this is just a little bit of a different way of working. Just another one. And so cyanotypes is another process I really enjoy doing. These are some students coating their paper. Most of you are probably familiar with it. It's also called sun printing. It's a 19th century process that is, with light sensitive materials, and then you can put negatives on it or plant matter. And this is at Sitka when I teach. I've taught cyanotypes, lumen prints, and photogravure there. I also did a really fun workshop about a year and a half ago in Beaverton, Oregon, for the town of Beaverton. So they had me teach them how to do cyanotypes so they could then teach it or have it as a public activity at their big music festival in June. So that was really pretty fun. And these are just a few of my cyanotypes. So that sort of gets us up to, about 2017. At this point, I was working full-time at the college. I had worked as a staff member for about 5 years, and then I taught for a few years full-time. But I was really ready to move on out of academia. I really enjoyed teaching in the workshop format. So 2017, I was feeling rather restless and decided I would make a big move. And I bought this big old building in Silver City, New Mexico. And I've been going to Silver City for, about 10, 12 years, and decided it would be a great little town to move to. It's a very artsy town, and this building is so beautiful. I really fell in love with it, but it was a wreck. And so had to do major renovations. This is the back area. This lot is included, and that's my building with the brick building. And there was no back door, so I put in a back door. And so now I have a sculpture garden and event space out there. And it's really great. So this is the front of my building. I opened on September 1st, 2019, and I showed my work as an introduction to myself, to the community, age and seduction. And so I'll show a few images from here. I was really seeking a smaller community and also a place I could show my work and have a studio and make work. So here you see one of the big skin pieces and the portraits that I printed as silk banners. So they're printed on silk, the portraits of women. I'm going to go quickly here because I'm going to run out of time, I think. I also represent other artists using different media, and in the last couple of years, I've had about 22 different exhibits and artist lectures. This is the late Eric Renner, and behind him is Nancy Spencer. And I did a big pinhole exhibit of theirs a year ago, and unfortunately, Eric died last spring. This is the workshop space. This is a photogravure workshop I was giving. This is Diana Bloomfield, who came to do a gum printing workshop. I've had tintypes and watercolors, and really love having teaching done at the space. That's really part of my mission. And it was going really great until March of this year, of course. Then the pandemic hit and my front window cracked at the same time. So these are my sutures on the window. So had to close the gallery, of course. I stayed closed until mid-July, and then I I put together an exhibit of local artists. So I had 55 different artists show work that they had been doing during the pandemic, and that stayed up for 3 months. So here's a couple of installation views of it. And it was really great for the community. It brought people together. It gave us a little bit of a focus and gave people a deadline to get some work done. And I got to meet a lot more artists. There's lots of artists here in Silver City. And then in the fall, the current exhibit I have up is called Facing Forward. And this is a juried exhibition open to women of color. And it's handmade prints and handmade photographs. It was juried by Satpreet Kalon from the Seattle area. So I'm just really thrilled to present this work during this time period. And there's some great work by a variety of different artists from across the country and also in Canada. So the silver lining for me during the pandemic was that it gave me time to get back in the studio. So I did this series called the Solitude Series. These are photopolymer gravures. These are very small. They're probably much smaller than what you're seeing on your screen. They're 4 inches by 4 inches. The photographs were taken the previous summer when I was teaching up at Sitka. So this is the Oregon forest, and they're taken with my iPhone, very much wandering alone in the forest. And so I hadn't printed these, so it seemed like the perfect time to bring them to the form they should be in. And so I'll go through these pretty fast. And at the time, I also started working with some cyanotypes, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And as a counterpoint to this, so these are very tight and I think quiet images. And here's how I display them. And so the chaos series has happened during this pandemic too, because I feel a lot of chaos. And so these are cyanotypes, and I really challenged myself to use up materials I had in my studio. So I have a lot of paper. I just love paper. So I printed on all these different beautiful papers. These are wet cyanotypes. So I've added soap bubbles and vinegar and turmeric, spices and coffee, wrapped them in plastic and exposed them out into the sun. And some of the papers are handmade papers, not made by me, but they have plant matter embedded in them. And so you can see it particularly in this one. And I just, I love the looseness of them and the unpredictability. Some of the paper totally fell apart. You know, it didn't work, but a lot of them, I think, you know, came out pretty good. So I'm going to end with some very recent figurative work. It's not really ready for prime time to show, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. So I'm returning back to the figure, and I'm collaborating with my building in a sense. I'm photographing upstairs where we've not done any construction. The light up there is so beautiful, and the walls are painted these funky colors. And of course, it's an aging building and it's dilapidated. And so I'm photographing, you know, my body, the aging body again. And I don't know exactly where this series is going. I'm playing with one other mode of representation, and that's gilding photographs. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. So I've printed on Kozo paper and on vellum, and then added precious metals to the back. This is a gilded picture. It's very hard to tell on this screen. You really can't see, but it has gold leaf on the back of it. Here's the back of it so you can see. So it's a different, again, it creates the image looking really differently. And, you know, I will say that, you know, returning to self-images, I've done self-images my whole life, and I've questioned that. I sometimes feel it's a, you know, question whether it's a narcissistic exercise. I think about the gaze, I think about the representation of the female body, and I choose to do my body a lot because, first of all, I'm available as a model, and also I have control over it, and it's what I put out into the world. But I really think a lot about that, and sometimes I've decided I just have to stop thinking, because when I think too much, I don't do the work. So for me, a lot of it is a matter of just doing the work, and that's where I'm at now. So thank you very much. I hope maybe you related to something that I've talked about or shown. This is my contact information, and feel free to reach out to me at any point. And I'd love to see you visit me in Silver City sometime. So thank you very much. All right, I'm gonna try to get the screen out of here.
Thank you, Karen. Good, great. I saw so many new pictures there. I thought we have a chance to do some question and answers, and if you guys look on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a Q&A box where you can type questions for Karen. I meant to tell you in advance, but she'd love to answer some questions. So if anybody's got any, now's the time to open that Q&A box. While we're seeing if anybody writes in, I'm curious about when I started doing gravures myself, I felt like it was kind of a deconstructive process. Do you feel like that as well, or do you feel like it's more sort of clean and refined than what you're used to? Does that make sense? I don't know how to say that exactly.
I don't know what you mean.
I guess I felt like I was making these really pristine pictures, and the gravures were a little looser in that way. But you come from something even looser than a gravure. So do you feel like it's more of a increased in construction?
In a sense, that's true, but it's it alters the image. I mean, there's a little bit of a softness, I think, that happens, and maybe some detail loss. It's a different impression rather than shooting with a large format camera and getting all that detail. So maybe that's what you mean. But yeah, for me, it's more precise because I'm used to doing more manipulated kinds of work, and also the technical aspects. I know you've done it enough to know there's so many problems you can get making the plates and all of that. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I see comments or questions, so I guess I will go ahead and read them. I'm going to switch my glasses because I can't read that close to the screen. Okay, so Christina, hi Christina, says, I love the experimental approach to your chaos series. What experiments more would you like to explore? I'm playing around with some encaustics. So I'd like to use adding color and encaustics, pushing the physicality of the work, printing on silk again, and I'm kind of thinking about installation with this most recent body. So, okay, and then Daniel Myers says, what is the title of the book you recommended? Oh my gosh, it's Photopolymer Gravure. The author is Clay Harmon. It's in the series that Christina Anderson has put together of all the alternative processes. If you want to email me, I could get it to you more precisely. But I think if you Google Photopolymer Gravure and Clay Harmon, it should come up. Yeah.
I think they have it on Amazon.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they should. Yeah. Hi, Leanne. No question, just a comment. Absolutely wonderful talk. Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. I appreciate the support. Let's see. Albert Alter, will you repost your link to the video and educational materials? YouTube, I think. Yes, I can repost that. You can also Google my name on YouTube and on Vimeo, Karen Hymer, and it'll come up. It's called the... oh gosh, I'm forgetting the titles of everything. I can't remember the name of my own video. Okay, something about the beauty of ink on paper. I think that's it.
That is it. I think that is it too.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Eugene. Hi, Gene. He says, if you need a series of scars, I have several new ones I'm willing to model for you. Aging is not easy. Thank you, Gene. Yay. Well, I don't want to get too close to anybody right now, but in the future, we'll do that. So. Okay, Anne Bagley, excellent talk, very interesting seeing different mediums, very inspiring seeing your work and hearing your life story. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I mean, reaching out to people and connecting is really important to me, so I'm really glad you found it. And then she adds, especially the women aging portraits. Thank you. Joan Byers, thanks for doing this, Karen. Hi, Joan. I love seeing all your work and the way your trajectory has unfolded. I'm looking forward to meeting up with you at Sitka or maybe New Mexico soon. I would love that. Unfortunately, I won't be going back to Sitka this summer, but I will be doing some gravure workshops, you know, if the virus permits. But yes, it would be great. You're a wonderful student. So, oh, Gene tells me he has antibodies. Well, okay, Gene, I'm still not going to get close to you at the moment. You're so funny. Okay, so I think that's all the questions I see. Are there any? I
have one more for you, Karen. What are your ultimate plans for the upstairs in your building? That looks awesome.
Oh gosh, the upstairs is so wonderful. It's 3,500 square feet. Each floor is, so it's a very big building. Oh my goodness.
Whoa.
Well, the building's talking. Something just happened. You know, I have my strobe equipment all set up there, so I have a shooting studio, but I've actually been using natural light. I would like to collaborate with the town and create actually teaching spaces up there where other artists could rent the space at a reasonable price to offer workshops. So flexible kind of space. Fantasy of living up there, but I have really bad knees from playing soccer for 25 years. So walking up the flight of stairs may not be so smart, but I'm not real sure. I have just, I'm really close to receiving a grant from the Federal Park Service to restore all my windows up there. And if I get that grant, that will go a long way to buttoning it all up so that it can be weather tight. So yeah, I'm looking for investors. You know, or grants, so to work on the upstairs. Yeah.
Right on. I think a couple more questions came in, and then I think there's some in chat as well.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's see. Craig Daniels says, lovely work. I'm inspired. I did some early self-portraits focused on the body, and now, much older, wonder if it would be fun to do again. Great. Well, that sounds good, but then you said something also, and I think it got cut off. But thank you, Craig. I appreciate that. And Anne says that I visited your gallery and met you about a year ago and was so favorably impressed by your gallery and the work there. Well, thank you, Anne. I'm sorry, I don't remember you, but if I saw your face, I might. Okay, Kathleen Coupland. Hi, Kathleen. Great to see you and hear your voice. You don't have to read this. See you soon. Oh, too bad. So I just read it. Okay. So then you said there's something someplace else?
Well, there's in chat, there's a few comments, I think. I don't know if they need to be read or not. If you open the little box that says
oh, I
chat,
see. Yeah. Okay, there I am.
towards the bottom, yeah.
Okay. Lynn Isabel, oh, says hello. People are saying hello. Let's see. Jan Cook says, it's great to see so much of your work over time and the progression of ideas and themes. Thank you. Well, I appreciate that because I thought it might be too much, but Sally Tilton, hi Sally, says, I really look forward to your new work as an installation. Love your work. Antwe, hi. It's great to see the career of your work and being my first photography professor, Karen. She was one of my students. You mentioned your combination of painting in your work. As I look at your photography's work, it seems there is a strong connection with how still life and body have been portrayed in painting. Could you share if there are any commentary on that? Thank you. Also, hi from Tucson and Pima Community College. Antwe is now teaching at Pima College. She's our full-time faculty there. You know, I think that's really interesting about still life and the body. I certainly am drawn to the Dutch painters. More recent work, the abstract expressionists, or I'm sorry, the German expressionists were really influential to a lot of my early work. So I'll have to think more about that. Great things to think about. Thank you. Open to suggestions too.
All right, I think that's all of them. Well, thank you, Karen, very much. And thank all of you for coming. And I want to remind you that on the third Wednesday of every month, we have these talks on Zoom. And you can look forward to seeing another one soon. We're going to be having Kate Miller Wilson, or Kate, she lives in the Midwest someplace. I can't remember right this second. And so she'll be speaking for us in January, and we're looking forward to that. So thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Ray, again for inviting me. It's a pleasure to see you again.